this bad boy. So yeah, awesome. Well, welcome everybody. I'm gonna, as everybody, as it starts kind of pouring in now, 11:02. We are so excited, very excited that everyone is here today. It was unbelievable. We have over almost, well, I should say, we actually had to cut it off, our registration process, at 1,000 people. So it's been an amazing response. And, this is just the very first one. So if Zoom doesn't crash on us at least once, then we'll call this whole thing a success. But yeah, it's really amazing. Thank you guys all. Just to kind of everybody's pouring in. So, and we'll go ahead and get started with our day. This is being recorded, everyone. So you'll be able to access this some point next week, and all our sessions throughout today and tomorrow. You'll be able to share them with your team or anybody else that you'd like to see. So you'll have access to all the recordings as we wrap up the sessions, and we'll send those out to you guys next week. So want to welcome everyone to season 2 of Home Builder Tech Nashville. No, not Nashville. This is not that was last year. This is season 2 Home Builder Tech from home. So Home Builder Tech Live, where this is the only conference where pants are optional. So you will not find that anywhere else, pants optional, at a conference. But really appreciate everybody coming in and joining us and really learning along with us. And so as we kick off the day, I just want to share the story of really how Home Builder Tech itself came about. And really it all originated in a bar, as all good stories do. It all originated in a bar in New York City. Chip and I were having a drink. I think we were maybe even at the Plaza Hotel. John Voight just walked by us asking where the bathroom was. And we said, we need to have a conference that is solely dedicated to digital sales and marketing. There is a huge hole in our industry from an education perspective. And focusing on the technology and the processes of what it takes to successfully run a home building company, and from a sales and marketing perspective in today's times. And so we quickly started chatting with everyone, and everyone was instantaneously in. It was like, absolutely, this is exactly what our industry needs. And everybody was so excited to help put this together. And so last year we were able to pull it off in Nashville, Tennessee, which was absolutely a blast. And this year we were gonna do it somewhere, and then coronavirus hits. And so, we had talked about the possibility, actually Chip had talked about the possibility pre-COVID about doing a virtual conference. And even us, we're kind of like, well, we really like that in-person vibe. Just the things that you get from being with other people. But now COVID hits, and we're like, well, if we want to do this, we don't have another option. So here we are, our industry's first virtual conference. So, it's going to be fun. It's going to be entertaining along the way. But because of that, these type of meetings, this type of a conference couldn't be more timely than it is right now with everything that's happened, right? The picture in each market, in each city across the country really is a different story everywhere we go. We talk to builders, all of us talk to builders all over the country in all different markets, and really there's not the same story anywhere. Whether it's related to social things going on, whether it's related to coronavirus, whether it's related to just the housing market in general, every market has its own little personal story and its own identity. And this has really been interesting for us because as an industry, it's drop kicked us into the 10 years forward that we're normally behind. And it's been forced upon us. And it's been a really, really good thing. And so, you know, the interesting part about this kind of being drop kicked and punted into this is the last few months has changed the way that we live, and it's changed the way that we work forever. And the unbelievable opportunity that I see upon us right now is our industry has an opportunity to shape and mold our future in the way that we work and live. And the way that we work and live have never been closer together than they are right now. And to be able to provide a home for someone that we can actually do that, we can actually solve that problem, to me is unbelievably inspiring, right? And so that is why you're here today. And so, and really what it's also shown us is that our industry and what we've been experiencing has really been a case of the have and the have-nots, right? So we really look at that term and from a social perspective, the have and the have-nots. But from our perspective as an industry, when we started work from home, stay at home, all of those things started going from market to market and sweeping all across the country, what we saw was the people who have, the builders that have invested in their technology, invested in the tools, their websites, online sales programs, the foundation of what it's going to require to be successful, the people that have done those investments, they have seen massive success. They have sold through, blown out their sales goals, have record months during a period where if you would have asked any of us a year ago how many homes we thought we would sell if we had 45 million people on unemployment and toilet paper was the current form of currency, and you'd have said, how many houses do you think that will sell? My answer, all of our answers would have been 0. And the people that have taken the time and invested in these things have seen success, right? The people that have not, well, it's been a little bit of a different story. Now, the great part about it is the market has been so strong and there's been such high demand that even the have-nots, some of the have-nots, have had the ability to kind of skate through and kind of really avoid disaster. And I really believe that we got a pass. If you weren't ready, we got a pass because the demand in the market is so strong, you're able to kind of skip through it with not being scathed. But on the other end of this, if this continues to happen, you won't get that pass again. And that's what's great about what you're here today for, is everyone that's here today is now in the bucket of haves. You have started the investment in yourself and your company to learning and making yourselves better, making your organizations better than they were before. So you guys are all on the right step for being here today. And of course, we couldn't pull any of this off without our partners and sponsors to help us bring education and deliver it to everyone exactly the way that we're doing it right now.
Yeah, I totally agree. And Matt, I think the first thing I want to do is give a shout out to all of the builders and sales and marketing teams that have done a fantastic job of navigating the last 120 days. Obviously, it's been a very challenging time, and the circumstances are radically different than they were before, and we're all kind of just figuring it out. And I think we've seen that we're able to do that. So kudos to us. I mean, I think a couple other things that we've got wonderful. Home ownership is strong, rates are low, and there's a lot of good things going on. So but as you said, Matt, yeah, we couldn't do this without our sponsors. And when we talked about doing this thing last year, it was kind of a pipe dream, and we weren't sure that it would work. And Zillow, we went and talked to them, and they said, yeah, we're in, let's do it. And so, really, Zillow's been wonderful to work with, and we really thank them, as well as all the other sponsors. And so, the fact that we've got almost 1,000 people watching this today makes me, either people are really bored, or they want to find out what's next, new, and different in the tech space. So thanks for coming and checking us out, and look forward to the next 2 days. Ange?
Yeah, Awesome. So I'm responding to people as they're coming in, and we've had a couple of people needing the links. Thanks, Chip. Sorry about that. Multitasking at its finest, right?
Right.
I'm going to be super quick because we want to get going with the keynote. But I'm going to cover a little quick bit of housekeeping. As Matt said, everything's being recorded, so have no fear. You'll have access to everything in the next few days. Just a couple of comments about the difference between chat and questions. You guys are familiar with Zoom. Chat is chat. You know, let us know how you're doing. Let us know you're here, all that kind of fun stuff. It's hard to monitor questions that are in chat. So if you've got a specific question for the presenter throughout the 2 days, please use questions. That's a good way to distinguish the two. The other thing, just your view. If you go up to the top right-hand corner, usually of Zoom, you'll be able to change your display and whether you're in speaker view or panel view, all that kind of stuff. So you've got a few options as to how you can view this session. Be familiar with the agenda and the conference link. Everyone should have a copy of that. We'll post that in the chat, but there's a few breaks and sessions throughout the day. Tell us, send us pictures, post pictures on Instagram, Facebook, use the hashtag HBTLive, and sorry, what's that, Matt?
No, go ahead, sorry.
Oh,
I have the notepad from last year.
Oh, there we go. We've got a break scheduled at about noon Pacific, 3 p.m. Eastern, but don't go away. We've got a fun Kahoot game that'll be about 15 minutes. We're going to try to broadcast it live on Facebook, so we'll see. I have the absolute pleasure to introduce our premier sponsor and keynote speaker to begin the day. Dr. Skylar Olsen is a senior principal economist with Zillow, and she's joined Zillow in 2012 and has been focused on investigating local housing markets with the importance of place in economic outcomes nationwide. She holds a doctorate in economics from the University of Washington, and I've had the pleasure of listening to her speak a couple of times at different industry events, including Women in Residential Construction a few years ago. And she has a wonderful gift of explaining the economics of housing in an easy to understand way, even with a little bit of humor sprinkled in there. So, and I'm not sure, Skylar, if you remember this or not, but I also had the pleasure of sharing an Uber with you to the airport after an event. And not only...
Oh, wonderful. I really missed that event, by the way.
Not only... But you know what, you're disciplined, but you're also just a really wonderful, genuine person. So Skylar, welcome to Home Builder Tech. We are so happy to have you. And we've got a lot going on in this world right now. And I know our attendees are super interested in what's happening from an economic perspective, and perhaps, you know, what is expected in the coming months. So on that note, over to you, Skylar.
Excellent. All right. Now, it wouldn't be a talk that I would give unless I forced a little bit of data down into people's experience. So here I'm going to start sharing my screen. And then, there we go. And let's go to present mode. Oops, let's go back to the top. A little backward preview there. All right. Okay, so this is an incredible experience. My new joke about, you know, what's happening is that this is in many ways the Economist Super Bowl and maybe the Olympics too, all rolled up into one. You know, the dismal economists of the world are trying hard to keep a little bit of our excitement down just because of just how interesting this is, how many new experiments are happening on a wide, massive scale, such as remote work, enabling us to really think about just the upcoming changes that are coming to the housing market, as well as an incredible challenge, which is forecasting what is going to happen and really even explain what is happening, right? Because in many ways, the story I'm about to tell is one that's surprising. You know, just like how Matt had talked in the beginning, right? I don't think we would have anticipated buyers returning quite as quickly as they have. Anyway, let's jump right in. Okay, I want to start. I won't spend too much time talking about non-housing numbers, right? I'll jump right back into housing, but I do want to just tee off the conversation with just a better understanding about how unprecedented this is. So what you're seeing in front of you here is the U.S. unemployment rate back in time, pretty darn far, right? We're going, pretty back on this timeline. So notice it starts back in the 40s, so after the Great Depression. The Great Depression would have been another big spike, much bigger than this number. Unemployment then was in the 20s, right? But here we can see that in modern history, these are unemployment rates that we've, in many ways, we've really never reached before in terms of how big this is. Now, I do want to, it's hard to see on this timeline, but you can see that unemployment rate pop back down to closer to 13% after reaching, close to 14 and a half, right? Now that plopping down, I do want to remind everyone, a lot of, when you look at the unemployment rate, what you're not including in that base are people who are very discouraged, right? So people who have taken themselves out of the labor market. And when we look at that increase in the jobs that have been recently that, made this unemployment rate a little bit better, economists are a little bit worried that we're not really capturing the full picture and that maybe the unemployment rate is still worse than that. But that said, in order to drop back down that significantly, that is a pace of improvement that's pretty fast. Now, it's a deep, you remember when everyone was talking about the shape of the recovery, what it's going to look like, it's going to be a V, no, it's going to be a U, no, it's going to be an L, no, a W. I think more recently I've seen a consensus coming around the idea that it's going to be a deep V. And I didn't know that lowercase and capital letters were on the table, but they absolutely are now. And when you consider the fact that a deep V, even if that recovery is pretty quick, getting back to the top still will take a bit of time. Now, I think most of the forecasts are now showing a bit of a shape like this. It's called an inverted radical, in terms of this fast recovery in the beginning, and then it'll slow down. But let's look at the housing numbers to see whether or not we believe that kind of projection, okay? Now, before I get there, I do want to also kind of evoke again this idea that we are experiencing our homes in such a new way, and that is leaving housing top of mind. Now, what you're seeing in front of you here, this is the trend of search on Zillow on for sale homes. Now, you can see that much like a lot of activity, search pulled back in those early days as well, right? You weren't looking at Zillow to buy a home, you were looking at the news, you were reading something else. Maybe you were gathering your family around you and really learning and enjoying what you could at a moment of such uncertainty and really such, those early days were just extraordinary, right? How quickly things had changed. Now, so that orange section is search that was lower than in 2019 at a time that normally would have been ramping up, right? Home shopping season would have been incredible. Now look at that blue line. That reached a height of 50% more traffic on Zillow in May than we saw at the same time in 2019. Now, we all have to acknowledge that Zillow is a place where you can also go to have a little bit of escapism, right? A little bit of adult pretend time. Imagine yourself in a different home, goodness, any other home, right, than the one that I'm stuck in. And so there is a bit of this that is aspirational search, escapism search, for sure. But some of the data I'm about to show you illustrates just how much of it were buyers looking to get ready, persevere, come back to the market, and participate. Now, I also want to point out, though, that the search is slowing down towards the end here. You'll see that theme a lot in some of these data, that the initial recovery was very dramatic. It does cause us to still have optimism, but the pace at which it's higher than last year, is starting to stabilize a little bit, and that's that idea of the recovery slowing down a bit there. All right, well, this is also getting back to work too, right? You're not spending quite as much, there are more people that jobs increase, right? You can imagine when you're unemployed, you can spend a lot of time searching and thinking, or if you're just furloughed or, other kind of moments. All right, now, Zillow, well, the Zillow Economic Research Team for sure. In early days, we realized that the data that we produce is inappropriate to understand what's happening in this environment because we produced it every month and we produced it on a monthly data, right? Inventory this month and then next month. Things are changing so fast that our first task in the early days was to stand up a daily metric that we would then update weekly. Now you can go to Zillow.com/research in order to I think it's posted on a Friday. Well, I forget what day of the week, but at the very least, if you come every week, you would see a new view of it. We have these weekly metrics that are coming back up. That's Zillow.com/research. If you want to go check that out, or for your own market, we have these for most major metropolitan areas. Anyway, this is the national picture. Okay. Now I want to first point your eyes to the orange line. Okay, this is our pending sales metric. So how many homes are going on the market and, from on market into contract, right? The bid's been accepted, the buyer has signed, credible commitment here. Actually, first too, because I'm talking to a builder audience, I do want to point out that our pending sales data and a lot of these metrics, just how they kind of filter through, pending sales is more likely to include the new construction purchases if you have a partnership with the MLS. If you do not, and you're not sending it through, which is actually pretty common, then it wouldn't be captured here. And then in many ways, in order for us to get a signal about new construction sales, we have to wait, for the recorder's office, right, for it to come through. And then it's going to be the same thing for new for sale listings, in the sense of just how a property makes it to the site, right? If I have a new construction home, a lot of yours could be spec, it could be finished, it could be one listing that counts as 5. And so, new for sale listings here too often does capture a bit more the existing home sales too, but because you're such close substitutes, these are still, I think, trends and patterns that you can use to reflect upon your own business. But I did want to be upfront about the, some of the failures of data in general. It's hard to know what the truth is, and it's hard to see everything. Okay. Anyway, pending sales numbers. You can see here, one, I want to point out how we started. Check out mid-February, okay? This was going to be the year. There are a lot of things that are upsetting about this experience, but I think for housing professionals in the early days, it was the idea that we had finally made it to sales activity that was going to be better, than kind of activity that had been really slow and steady out of the last global financial crisis. Now we had finally reached kind of big numbers in terms of sales activity. We had finally reached new big numbers in terms of, single family home starts, right? Your own confidence had reached highs. We'll see that in a second. And yet this experience took that tumbling down to the point where we had at that bottom, that peak, the trough here for pending sales was at 39% below 2019 levels. Okay? Now, at the same time that we saw that happen, check out the blue guy. Okay? Now, the blue guy, new for sale listings coming mostly from existing homeowners, right? So in some ways, this is now your competition, right? Your close substitutes. So this is listings coming from existing homeowners coming onto the site. Again, listing activity had finally also picked up much higher than last year. And then it too came tumbling down. So homeowners pulling their homes off the market, or even just not putting them on, right? Not pulling this forward. Okay. Now, if you check it out, so now I have both these things coming down, right? Now look at the recovery. And I want to point out that the orange guy much faster in pace in terms of its lift than the blue guy, right? Here we've got buyers returning at a faster pace, building their confidence, persevering through this market. Sellers too are returning. We have more listings coming on the market each day, but at a slower pace. You put those two things together and you have inventory being harvested down, 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 which I think helps explain, to some of the ideas that were at the, the top of the hour, right? Just how quickly new construction homes are selling is because existing inventory is record lows, right? Is so tight in these markets because buyers returned. Now, I do want to nod, you guys, I think, would know more your sentiment than in many ways this compilation from the National Association of Home Builders Market Index for home builder confidence. But you guys too, I think, in many ways had pulled back on starts activity, had pulled back on producing new homes just because of how uncertain it was. And yet now you're watching, the buyer activity return. And so builder confidence is building up very quickly, still below, on a national average, still below where it was, right, in those really glory days of February and January, but still rising up, right, continuing to grow. Okay, now, it is my intense pleasure as a dismal economist to give everyone Econ 101 flashbacks in terms of how do I explain the idea that prices in this kind of economic crisis, with this kind of unemployment loss and income loss, why would there not be deals out there? Why would we still see price stability, okay? Now, I think in our mind, the intuitive idea to think about, and remember from Econ 101, income loss, job loss, that's a demand shock, okay? So that demand curve shifts down. That's the one that comes with prices coming down and quantities coming down. But in a new, for existing homeowners putting on their home for the market for sale, that inventory, that was also a supply shock. Sellers also pulled back. They lost their confidence. Inventory pulling back, inventory becoming more constrained, that has the opposite effect on price to hold it up, okay? So that when we actually look at our price dynamics, we're not seeing falling homes very significantly yet. I'm going to talk a little bit about our forecast that we expect it to come. I do want to point out median list price has a bit of a problem with looking about whether or not it's reflecting truly price increases on individual homes or just a changing composition. If you look at that, shift around, that first initial drop, right? So the first peak there was actually into April, periods where, I think it was higher end homeowners more likely to just be participating in general at the beginning of the season before we had the shock. Then once we had that shock, higher end homeowners were more likely to have pulled their listings off. And so you saw that composition change. And yet now higher end homeowners are more likely to be the ones with the available inventory, willing to come back and participate, because in many ways it is a haves and have-nots story. A lot of that job loss was on lower end incomes. Higher end is in many ways sometimes insulated from a lot of those shocks. Now, if I look at our Zillow Home Value Index, this is the guy on the right. That's the orange line. I'm looking at, both of these are year-over-year numbers except for that tiny call-out box. Now, I want to point out, I'm including a much longer timeline here on the Zillow Home Value Index year-over-year because I want to leave in your mind the numbers that you see in the last housing bubble crash, just how negative it went, right, in terms of those year-over-year numbers. We had numbers as low as negative 10%. Home values fell 20%, right, from peaks in 2018 all the way down, 2008 all the way down to 2012. That was some significant home equity loss and price drops, okay? Now, if I want to look at the end of the time series, the now of it all, notice that I still have a year-over-year that's positive. And if I look at the month-over-month call-out box that I pulled out here, I also have positive month-over-month numbers. But the month-over-month gain in prices is starting to slow down. This is our first initial observation that prices are starting to slow. But one of the problems with formal home price indices in this environment is that sales, this is powered by sales records, right? And then we make the Zestimates, just like Case-Shiller is powered by sales records and they make the sales pairs, right? So we each have a different kind of methodology, but it's all based on sales activity that are reported at a lag, and now more at a lag than normal. So I think in some ways, some of the signals that we're seeing from the formal price indices are delayed, right? So we'll start to see a bit more of a national softening that really reflects the recession dynamics in the months to come. And I'll talk about the forecasts for that one. But notice the month-over-month numbers are slowly starting to come down. But if I talk about the forecast, let's jump right into it. The left here is our forecast for prices, and the right is the forecast for sales, right, activity. Now, it's kind of funny to think about, a forecast for sales that are happening right now, but again, remember, sales records are at a lag. So in many ways, this is a nowcast for sales, and then the forecast is in the recovery portion of it. But check out the price side for a second. Now, as with all forecasts these days, because we're very uncertain, economists are giving not just one forecast, right, but a pessimistic forecast, an optimistic forecast. And so let's focus first on the blue guy. Now that translates to a home value fall of anywhere from 1.7% between February and October. So the February highs and their lowest point at around October of this year is when we're forecasting prices to become the most soft. Okay, then I have price recovery before, in around spring of 2021. So before the summer of next year, prices should return back to February numbers. That ... at 100, that's February, okay? Now that'll net out at a year-over-year number that never really gets that negative. So that because we're gonna, drop from February to October and then start increasing, that year-over-year change is only gonna be slightly negative. Contrast that to negative 10%, right? Or more than just negative 10%, because remember, those price fallings happened for an extended period of time. That was incredibly painful for home equity and wealth loss. This is not then, okay? Now, I also want to point out that forecast has become more mild as we've incorporated more data. Originally, it was built on what does housing do when GDP does X, and then we use GDP forecasts and layer that on top. Then we were able to keep making it a more complicated and interesting forecast. We incorporated the pending sales data that didn't fall quite as much and that is recovering very quickly. We incorporated also the idea of just general inventory being harvested low, but also inventory even pre-crisis being very low. Each of those new additions and complexities that we added to the forecast moved us to more and more optimistic, which is really wonderful for housing. Originally, that pessimistic likelihood was at 30%. Now it's much less likely, and the optimistic and pessimistic probabilities are more balanced. Now check out the sales forecast though. Now that fall that we're nowcasting, right, because we haven't really seen all the sales reported at a much bigger lag in a lot of counties across the US. So even those, that drop, that bottom right there is May numbers. So end of April, beginning of May is where that bottom peak hits. That's still a nowcast in many ways. We're not very certain about what that true number is because of the sales lag, but our pending data does confirm that size. That's a drop of 40% from those highs, a little over 45% from those highs in February down to their bottom. And then you can see the modeling does forecast this initial early fast recovery, and then things start to really slow down, getting back to true, those where we expected to be. So the February numbers, not just getting back to 2019 levels, because pending is already above 2019 levels, right? But remember, February, we were doing gangbuster activity, so we want to get back there. How long will that take us? The blue guy doesn't get there until fall of 2021. And that's because we expect the activity recovery to start to slow down. A lot of those early buyers that returned were the ones that were ready from previous home shopping seasons, right? I want to jump around just a bit. When we think about what got us into a position where buyers would want to push forward, would want to buy in an uncertain environment, even if they are reading about forecasts that say prices may get a little soft. Hopefully they're reading the idea that the forecasts are actually, a very mild idea that prices aren't going to fall nearly as much. And I'm going to talk a bit about why this is not like the global financial crisis, but this is one of those reasons, right? Why it's not like the global financial crisis. But even leading into this experience in terms of the inventory was still at record lows. I had disappointing home shopping seasons before. The risk then was bidding wars and escalation clauses. The risk now is buying a home in a virtual environment where maybe I can't touch and feel as much as I used to, and there's a lot of uncertainty, but life is moving ahead for me. You can't stop the kids from becoming teenagers. You often can't stop the baby from coming. There are really cool studies that look at what happens in a recession. We do stop getting pregnant, and you might delay getting a divorce. But a lot of life has a lot of momentum to still push you forward. And then, you were disappointed last year, you're persevering through this year, a lot of because this idea, inventory, had already been so low. Now, I'll spend a little bit more time just teeing up the idea that that's so unlike the last housing crisis where we had excess inventory, both from a building boom, right? That was driven by excess credit. We'll see that in a second. but also just housing inventory in general. You know, there was a lot of activity then. A lot of homes were listed on the market for sale. We started with a glut of homes entering that crisis. This time, we're starting with a shortage. Okay. Now, I want to pop back up. Something else that might cause the recovery to slow down is uncertainty in the financial markets that is causing credit availability to be very tight, right? So to the extent that banks themselves are feeling very risky, extending that credit is not something they're quite as willing to do. And so in many ways, the buyers that are showing up are, of course, the lucky, right? You didn't lose a job, otherwise you wouldn't have access to credit, but you also have high credit scores. You have good debt to income ratios. You have good income documentation, right? Those are the people who are able to show up. I mean, one of the ways that I've been characterizing this is, you know, we're getting the buyers that were ready. Eventually, we're going to get into the business of making new buyers that are ready, right? Getting more buyers ready, which means they're saving more. They're getting the down payment in order. They're, you know, looking at homes for sale. Their own life events are moving forward. That's going to be more challenging in an incredible recession like the one that we're in. We're seeing the recovery being very quickly, but that's challenging, right? Becoming ready to be a home buyer and saving in this environment is a challenge, okay? Now, I am going to talk in a second about how housing is just much more resilient leading into this crisis, and that's one of the reasons why we're so optimistic about housing, right? It's not a housing crisis. The problem is not coming from housing. It's a health crisis, right? And in that way, it leaves housing as an industry more resilient than the economy as a whole. But I do still want to point out that the benefits that are coming from the CARES Act are absolutely crucial to keeping distressed homeowners from foreclosing and introducing distressed sales into the market. And that's how you get price declines, right? When you have a flood of, say, foreclosures, right? That's what happened last time. It was a foreclosure snowball that made prices continue to come down, down, and down, and down. The record setting, I mean, the unprecedented unemployment has been met with unprecedented government support. However, it expires July 31st. Now, a lot of homeowners had record home equity coming into this experience, but there are many markets where, you know, there were more of the homeowners who had low down payments, who were themselves a more marginal buyer. Credit was still nothing like the global financial crisis. So even without this support, I wouldn't expect the same level of foreclosures by any means, but that does not mean that there aren't homeowners struggling that are absolutely benefited by the extension of the unemployment benefits and also the small business loans. I mean, it's a huge support at this time. Forbearance as well, of course, fits in this this picture as well. The being able to delay paying back your foregone mortgage payments. I do want to say too, the other advantage that homeowners have, of course, in this environment is getting access to low Fed funds, or excuse me, low mortgage rates. That is an incredible boon, especially if you still had your job. You could get out the cash out refi to have some savings, a nest egg in case of job loss and emergency in the future. That's another incredible advantage. So too is just the fact that housing in general is surrounded, for sale housing is surrounded by the housing finance apparatus, right? 80% of those loans are insured, which means that it would be easier for, say, the federal government to stipulate how foregone payments are paid back, right? Some national conversation is about, oh, just tack it on to the end of the loan so that you never have a moment where your monthly affordability is incredibly challenged that can risk you going delinquent and introducing a foreclosed property to the market. Okay. Now, okay, CARES Act, very important. Don't want to downplay the support that the government is offering to those kind of more marginal buyers before this crisis. But I do want to point out that the set of current homeowners, even the ones that are more recent, right, pre-crisis, that were kind of on the margin, who that marginal buyer was a different marginal buyer than before the last crisis. when we had excess credit, when we had predatory lending, that really put an estimated 4.5 million people into home ownership that really shouldn't have been. They could not withstand job loss. They could not withstand their mortgage payments popping back up if they got an adjustable rate loan. Those homeowners were dropped back in to the rental market. That's one of the reasons why rent burdens actually grew so significantly, is because you had so many people be reintroduced to a rental market where we had been underbuilding apartments because we were in a building boom that was driven by excess credit in the for sale side. Okay, but yes, homeownership rates had started to increase. A lot of that we explain with just the aging of the millennial population, because credit standards remained very tight leading into this crisis. We had good reforms in many ways in terms of how you had to document your income in order to get access to credit, and other kinds of more substantial rules around who can have access to a loan that's going to really impact their life should they default. So home ownership rates still remain very low. We did not have excess home owners, which means we did not have excess building, before this crisis, because you didn't see the heat revving up. Now things were real hot, but that was more about a record expansion of massive generation. We can talk about that in a second. The fundamentals in many ways are still there. Now I want to remind everyone, when we say excess credit, I mean, those days were those pre-last crisis in 2000, the early 2000s, it was nothing like today when we think about, the landscape of getting access to mortgages. These days, over 90% of loans are your vanilla 30-year fixed, right? Back then, if you recall, around half of loans were not even fixed rate loans. They were adjustable rate mortgages, or balloon, mortgages on top of that. I mean, it was a very different climate. It absolutely was predatory excess credit that drove excess building, which is, this side here, and led to, really what caused the housing market to fully collapse. Was it imbalance? Was excess? And this is not then, absolutely not then. Okay, now that's looking at the layout of the land. We're watching the recovery happen. We think the recovery could happen a little bit more slowly. When we look into the future, what are we thinking about housing and what are we excited about? Everyone these days is using their home for a lot more things than they used to. It's not just where I live, it's my daycare. My kids aren't in school yet. Well, the big one's in preschool, but that's still kind of a little bit daycare-esque. So, it's my daycare, it's my gym, it's my restaurant, it's my everything. It's my office. I actually kicked the baby out of her room. My daughters are now sharing a room, which comes with its own headache, but at the very least I get an office where I can work in private and sanity, right? But 2/3 of people that we surveyed who are newly remote are not working from a dedicated home office. 2/3, I know this is a similar number, it kind of seems, it's just coincidental. 2/3 say that they would consider moving if they were to work remotely over the long term. And that's not just fully remote, that's even if they were working a few days a week from their home or a couple days a week from their home. Now, I think industry has recognized this new need and this new interest, because when we look at the prevalence of mentioning your home office in listings on Zillow, those kinds of listings have jumped 10%, right? The idea that having a dedicated home office is a big deal. Now, we also did another survey of builders, but also looked at our search data in order to kind of see whether or not there was a greater sentiment towards new construction housing for its newness, for its, if you imagine maybe a more germophobic populace, right? Because before this, when we did surveys, that was actually the #1 reason why people want new construction homes. 41% they wanted it simply for the newness itself, that no one else had been in the home. We haven't had those surveys results yet. That's coming very soon in our big consumer survey. I think we're just now getting the results. No, the results have come in. We're doing the analysis now, so stay tuned and we'll update that number, post-crisis, see if that number has jumped the idea of newness. But at the very least, we've seen search on new construction homes jumped 73%. Remember the existing home sale, or rather all for sale homes on Zillow, that only jumped 50%, okay? So the interest in new construction homes does seem to be reflected, but I don't think it's always just this newness, I think it's also the idea of, just the kinds of homes and being able to customize, or being able to find homes that fit kind of a more modern sensibility if existing home sales existing home listings are so rare, right? In many ways, kind of the builder inventory is the inventory in a lot of these major metropolitan areas, because existing homeowners are still so lack confidence, right, in terms of putting their homes on the market for sale. It's coming back, and there are markets around the country where new listings are returning just as much as buyers as well. Those markets, in many ways, are still very hot. We were talking about Raleigh, for example, earlier today. But for the most part, national existing home industry is so low that it really does favor new building at this time. I don't think I have a slide on it, but I do want to, well, maybe we'll do it this way. Okay, so another thing that started to happen in relation to remote work, which is people started talking about urban flight. Surely we're all scared of these dense cities where coronavirus, is much more prevalent. And that's causing people to flee American cities. We didn't actually see that reflected in the data. The data that you're seeing right here is search on for sale homes that go towards suburban areas, and you're seeing that actually fall. We're seeing, on the flip side, a rising share of search in not just urban, but rural areas as well. One of the things you can kind of think about there, right, is or at least when I kind of formulate and try and think about this, one, it's not flight, it's not fear. I'm not leaving urban areas, it's not this fast pace that we're talking about because I'm fleeing coronavirus or a greater risk of contagion. It's going to be a much slower process if we do see the suburbs, have a building interest. It'll be, I need credible remote work in the future. Twitter came out. Zillow is very bullish on remote work as well. Lots of tech companies have reflected an interest, but you need to know that it's not just your employer, it's your industry at large, right? Because our family out into a rural area or into a totally different metro in order to access, homes that you can actually afford and buy a home. You want to be sure that you can still access your job opportunity that drove you to a really expensive metro or the urban core in the first place. So the fallen share of suburban search at least is, proof is such a big word for me. It means a lot to prove something. So I don't want to use that, but at least discredits the idea that there's urban flight. Now, that said, we think that remote work will actually bring a lot of moves, but it's on the margin, right? The 45-minute commute becomes the 60-minute commute if you only work a couple days a week. And actually, I should mention that most, people who are considering what is the future of remote work, there absolutely will be a larger share of jobs that are fully remote, but that was a teeny tiny fraction before. I mean, really, really small, okay? Now it's 55, but it was teeny tiny before. So growth in that category will surely come, but it will not be, the majority of the way that people work. But if we do see an explosion in remote work, it's the couple days a week kind of model in order to offer, work-life balance to people or other benefits that they're enjoying, avoiding huge commutes, right? But that means that on the margin, I can recalibrate. 45 minutes becomes 60 minutes. I think that's one of the reasons why we're seeing the swell in the rural, right? Is because I'm on the margin, just moving a little bit further out. Also, though, I do want to, economists in general have long substantiated that people's preferences don't change very fast. The urbanophile will not become the rural homesteader, right? The urbanophile will simply live in a different city maybe every year, right? So there are lots of ways to imagine what remote work may bring to the housing market without spelling the death of the American city. But I think it still does calibrate a lot of good moves. Now, I have heard more, from our builder survey, what kind of new homes you're going to build. It wasn't just the home office, right? You guys are more creative than that. So it was also ensuite bathrooms, right? And double masters. And when I saw that, I instantly thought of this. Okay, so Millennials moved home in the last recession, the global financial crisis. And on the left, ones of, can you guys still hear me? I got a note on my thing that says my internet connection is unstable. So is it okay still? So unmute and nod, or did I lose you entirely?
You're still here. I can hear you. You're breaking up a little bit.
Oh, no. Shoot!
That's
Are you
okay.
there?
Are you there?
Okay. My apologies.
You could turn your video off,
That's one of the
Skylar.
challenges of remote work. You know, good internet connection. Am I still here?
You are.
Okay.
You're still here. Maybe try turning your video off. Sometimes that helps. We can do that for you, actually. There we go. Are you there?
Okay. I shut that down. Okay. I'll persist. So what millennials need, they rent for it on their way to buying homes, but bearing down on the rental market. At the same time, you had all these foreclosures, and we had been underbuilding apartments. High rent burdens, high student loan debt. That's a real advantage to avoid rent by living with your parents. Now they never left, which in many ways is what we use to explain why existing inventory was often very less. More boomers were housing adult children, which delayed downsizing, which delayed exiting the for sale market in favor of, say, using your home equity to rent, right, in a different place, because you still had to house adult children. This whole new experience of adult children moving home to a couple of, to two more generations. So if millennials went to their boomers' homes, now we have Gen Z returning to their Gen X parents' homes. We've never seen more adults living in their parents' houses. It's record number at 37 million. 2.7 million of them are new, which is why you see that jump in 10% higher number of adults living at home these days. And when you graduate into a recession, you also have poor labor market outcomes that can stick with you for an extended period of time. Estimates are up to 7 years. So that makes it harder to launch, not just because rent burdens are high, but because, you know, your own income prospects are more challenged when you graduate into an economy like this. There we go. Sorry, my other thing froze. I do want to point out that where the for sale industry, for sale housing is very resilient, you know, the rental market is really challenged at this time. You can see that normally in this kind of seasonality, right, our rents would be increasing. Rents fell this past April. It recovered a little bit in May. A lot of that is finally getting the unemployment checks. I only mention rental markets here is because it's the very top of your home buyer pipeline, right? In terms of the renter, then becomes the first-time home buyer, then becomes the repeat home buyer, and by age 42, you're ready to build or buy a new construction home, right? Once you've moved your way up.
Oh. Skylar, you there? We'll give her one sec. Zoom problems.
Yeah, I think she's there.
As well. So we watch that kind of soften from building. So I want to leave you with this last slide. You know, the record expansion obviously gone, but the demographics are still there. And if you think about the median age of the new construction buyer is at 42, check out the wave to the left of that age. So I've pointed that one out to you. The orange guys right now are the ones bearing down on that wave, that crest, and then even to the right of it, right? You're 7, you're 20, you're 37, you're 39-year-olds, right? That is a big increase and then like come with moving up buying, right? With buying a new construction home, right? Now, we can delay these major life events. They are often pushed out into the, we will within the next 2 years. It's going to be right to where these demographics absolutely matter in terms of the long run. All right, I'm gonna.
Skylar, we lost your screen.
This.
We lost your PowerPoint there for the last couple of minutes.
Oh no. Okay, let me. Do you guys see it? This. This one?
It's
You
coming.
see the demographic wave here?
Not quite. I'm seeing
Okay.
a message, Skylar. You've started screen sharing, but let's see.
Okay, we're getting comments. It sounds like Skylar, your internet connection may be a little spotty. You're saying they can hear Ange and I pretty easily.
We've got a question here about can we share the PowerPoint afterwards? Yes, we will definitely. We will provide all of that, all of the extra slides that we're missing.
The recording and the slides will all be provided. So sorry for the internet. Gotta love the internet issues, but all that will be provided, and we'll send all that with an email. So Skylar, thank you so much. I'm gonna pop my video back on here, and as Chip, you can start popping in and as well, and really appreciate Skylar coming on. Unfortunately, right at the end there, we had some internet quality issues, but what can you do, guys? The very first virtual conference, sometimes we're at the mercy of the Zoom gods.
I made it back in. Thank you so much, guys, for listening. So sorry about that. I actually see my internet really did struggle there. One of the challenges of remote work. Hey, have a great rest of your conference. Thanks so much for doing this. I'm going to I think the demographic wave and looking at those, the size of those populations is really powerful. So I'll make sure we send you guys the slides and you can share. Okay?
Awesome. Thank you so much.
All right. Take care, guys. Bye.
Awesome. Okay, guys, real quick, I just wanted to mention, so if you all go to the agenda page, which is you would have gotten in your email link from your email registration, it's homebuildertech.net/conference. And make sure you refresh that web page. That's when, as we get closer to each session, that session will then become available for you to click. There are 2 ways to join the meeting. At first, it wasn't one of the ways wasn't working properly, but that's now been fixed. So you can click the button that says "Join the Zoom meeting" once that session's been opened up on the screen. But make sure you refresh your browser. For some reason, if the page doesn't auto load, there's also the Zoom meeting ID that is above that you can just copy and paste into your Zoom meeting account. And you should be just fine there. So we've got 2 ways to access that in case one of them fails. So we got a couple backup plans there. Yeah, so thank you, Skylar. Just everybody remember to refresh their page to get the most updated links and stuff as those become available. So we should have Anthony Grast coming up. Anthony, are you in?
He is, I've asked.
Oh, hold on. Anthony Grast, here we go. Promote to panelists. I think I promoted the wrong.
Did you?
Whoever the other Anthony was, sorry about that. I really didn't mean to promote you. I'm going to take the other Anthony back to an attendee. Ange, did you promote Anthony Grast?
I sure will. Just hold on one sec. I will get right in there. Where? There he is.
Should be popping up. Here he comes.
Hey, there we are. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Excellent. Thank you.
Chip, I'm going to pop off screen. You got it.
Yeah, you bet. How's it going, Anthony?
It's going well. I'm glad my network sucks less. So hopefully everything will stick together.
Well, I'm sure it will. Well, I'm super excited to introduce Anthony Gross from Homebridge Financial. Anthony and I have worked together for a number of years. Like you're a seasoned veteran in the home building space, and I mean that in a good way. But I think Anthony is a premier expert in mortgage and finance in our industry. And one of the things that Anthony and I have talked about over the last couple of months is really ways where we can improve the process of, how we go. We find a house that we like. It's on a website. What comes next? And that sometimes that handoff is less than efficient. It can be kind of binary and vague. And so, how do you tighten that up? How do you look for incremental improvement on how we can entice them, get creative with financing, and a lot of the things that, that you're going to talk about. The big one, which is what we get all the time, is I want buy it now. I want buy it now. And there's a lot of reasons why buy it now isn't the right way to say it. And so, let's talk about all those things, Anthony. And, I'm really excited about having you on here because your information is extremely important, especially now in this new phase that we're in.
Well, thank you, Chip, for the introduction, and good morning, everybody. Anthony Gross from Homebridge Financial. I'm really excited to be here today. As Skylar mentioned in her presentation, 2020 has been a challenging year. From COVID-19 to the stay-at-home orders, to the largest, fastest, deepest economic downturn in recent history, buyer demand and confidence was significantly shocked this year. In addition, we witnessed the biggest shift in technology adoption and use, I believe, ever, as a lot of sales moved online. This year, what I call really flipped the digital switch for many, many buyers and all industries out there. Now, as sales leaders, we had to adapt quickly. We had to upgrade our online presence. We had to adjust our sales processes. And now when I look and talk to builders, I see really strong websites or web presence, online presence. We see virtual walkthroughs, 3D walkthroughs, online appointments. We see search engine optimization, online sales consultants, the whole gamut. But here's my question to you. Did your financing change? Did the financing content change? No, it didn't. Financing was left behind in this digital switch. In 2020, 88% of all new homes closed this year, that comes from CoreLogic data, utilized financing. So upgrading your content and your communication and how you engage buyers around financing is absolutely critical in this new normal as you move forward. So I have a short time window to give you 5 great ideas that I think will really help you now and move you into the future as well. So let's switch. Let's go ahead and put my slideshows up, and hopefully you guys can all see this, and we'll get going with the first idea. So if one of our people here could just let me know if they can see the presentation. I believe I'm showing it. But the number one idea I want to share with you is market intelligence. Do you see the market? There are lenders, as lenders, we have access to all sorts of data about what's going on in the market. Do we share it? I don't see it being shared a lot. Now, builders, you guys understand so much about your market. You understand the build cost, the lot cost, the neighborhood, the pricing, what type of floor plan, what type of amenities, upgrades, schools are in the areas where you're building. But few builders actually.
Hey, Anthony.
Okay, sorry, I was reading something. This is sort of the Zoom presentation. Stuff pops up in front of you. But few builders really have an understanding of how buyers finance their homes. Understanding buyer financing preferences and the price points and areas where you're building, the trend and market depth in the area where you're building, as well as the demographics of your buyers is really beneficial to both your sales team and your lenders in how to engage buyers. So let me share some examples of market intel you should be asking for or trying to get on all of your developments.
Hey, Anthony,
Yes.
I'm not seeing your screen.
Okay. Okay, I'm selecting share my screen. Okay. Apologize about that, folks.
You're fine.
Okay. Okay, more. Well, I apologize, folks. I'm pushing the share my screen button and nothing is happening here. So let me try one more thing here to see if I can get this operational. Can you see that now, Chip?
No, I don't. But you know what? Listen, it's no big deal because the things that you're talking about, we can just watch you and do your thing. You know, yeah, just go for it.
Okay, I apologize, folks. We'll get this. This is always the fun part about this. Let's see. Okay, well, tell you what, I'm going to talk through it and do my best. I'll give you a copy of the presentation that I'm talking about later. So let's go ahead and get going on it. And the first idea is around market intelligence. And as I said, the builders have great intel, but they don't understand the buyer financing preferences. So what do you want to look for from your lender? There's a couple things. Number one, understanding buyer finance preferences by the type of loans that they're using. And the data that I was going to show you is actually from the northwest corner of the Orlando metro for the first 5 months of the year. It's in Apopka, Florida. And in that area, they had 102 new homes closed. 65 of these loans used conventional financing. What was fascinating about just this overall data set is we could see that 65% of the buyers were conventional buyers buying around $300,000. This is really valuable because it gives you an idea that, okay, these buyers in this area are generally of higher credit quality, more money down. What's interesting too is only 6 or less than 6% of buyers paid cash, but the cash buyers were averaging about $323,000. So those buyers aren't buying investment property. Those are probably downsizers moving down from the Northeast. Equally important is what is the down payment or average down payments of these buyers. And one of the graphics I have for you breaks down by less than 10%, 10 to 20, 20+%. And in this area, 49% of buyers only put 10% or less down. The next rung up between 10 and 19% were an additional 13%. What that means is 62% of buyers who closed a new home purchase this year had less than 20% down. From a lender perspective, that means they are very susceptible. I consider them below average financial strength. That's not bad credit. It's just below average financial strength for their ability to absorb interest rate movement and price changes. So if I'm a builder in that area, having this intel is super helpful because in my pipeline, I want to make sure people are locked and credit underwritten so I can prevent buyer fallout. More importantly, if you are offering and selling upgrades, this buyer profile isn't going to have the cash to pay for upgrades. So are you going to allow them to finance it? Knowing this in advance, coming up with a plan will really help you a lot. The other types of data that you should be looking for are sales trends and data. And one of the graphs I was going to show you is a dot plot starting in January, ending in May, which shows the sales price of every new home sold and closed recorded in county record in that period. And what you can see is, think of it as a fish meter. Where are the fish in different price ranges? Is the school of fish thinning, trending down, trending up? So that is something that you'll need to look at when I get the presentation out to you. But the most important demographic that you can have, or the most important information that you can have from your lender, are the demographic details of buyers in those areas. And what's fascinating about this area, Apopka, Florida, in this specific zip code, is the two largest buying segments are millennials, who are 38% of buyers, and Gen X's, which are 40% of buyers, both having very good credit scores, buying around the same dollar amount. Why is this important? If you have read the Zillow new construction report, one of the things they highlight in there about millennials is millennials represent 41 or 42% of the buying population. They also are approximately 42% of them purchase above their price range. Now, they're willing to buy up for a better home, or they're willing to upgrade that new home. So having that data ahead of time will really help you with your engagement with buyers. Also, what's interesting is Gen X being 40, Gen X as a population is only about 26% of new home buyers. So great to have this intel to really sharpen your strategy ahead of time, being active, not reactive to the market. So idea number 2 is about content. Now, we went from an analog world, okay? We went from in-person and handshaking to a digital world. Well, our content must follow suit. So interactive financing content is I'm going to give you 3 ideas around there that I want you to consider. Number 1, adding educational videos. Video content absolutely engages buyers today, and it engages them while they're on your site. So talk to your lenders about creating these videos. Think of a YouTube video with somebody speaking to them on a variety of different subject matters that they can access. If you know your population, you know which videos to put in there. The most important question we get asked in lending today, and this is based on the last 60 days, is this the right time to buy? You should absolutely have an answer to that. You should be talking to your buyers about it, because they're asking questions. They're like, I don't understand. And there's all sorts of other topics and things that we can add in there: cost of waiting, financing roadmap about the loan process, as well as affordability and several other things. So what else can you add to content? You can add interactive tools. What are interactive tools? Interactive tools are professionally made videos or little vignettes or clips that include an embedded tool that buyers can manipulate. So if you think of a static mortgage calculator, that doesn't have any narrative to it. These have narratives to it, and buyers can play with it and adjust it, and it's a different way to engage. Again, in this area, some very popular interactive tools are rent versus buy and wealth creation, which is the opposite, or which is one of the answers to why buy now for buyers. Are there other content ideas that you can add? Absolutely. You can add pictures. Well, pictures tell 1,000 words. And I always recommend loading infographics. So on my screens, the infographics look really good. Infographics are visual representations of a variety of topics that are easily understood by buyers. They really engage them. But here's the great thing about infographics. Infographics can be used for web and social media content. They can be used for point of sale. They can be used or blown up on a foam core board in your model home. I have some builders who actually feature them on their flat screens in their model home, and the sales teams utilize those to engage buyers in conversation. And so they're very powerful, they're text friendly, they're mobile compatible, and you should be able to get them co-branded with the builder's name, sales team's name, and lender's name. So those are 3 ideas on content. There's a lot more out there, but those are great ones that I see really are impactful. On infographics, some of the important ones that I see are like a community report card or a real estate report card that covers schools, commute times, a variety of subject matter like that. Those seem to be very interactive. Also, the visualization of a rent versus buy or a wealth accumulation or a cost of waiting are also good to have as well. So let's move on to communication. Chip talked a little bit about buy it now. I'm not going to talk about buy it now, but I am going to talk about a tool.
Hey, Anthony. Hey, bud. We are out of time. I hate that we are out of time. You know, I feel like we need to have a follow-up on this discussion because we could go on for another 45 minutes. I hate to have to do that to you, but we've got to keep everything on track. So, Matt, why don't you want to take it over and go ahead and get it. Thank you, Anthony, so much for your insights. It was great.
No problem. Thank you.
Thanks, guys. Everybody, the next sessions will be, I just dropped the link for the live and on-demand sessions in the chat. If you go to homebuildertech.net/conference, make sure you refresh your screen. The buttons will update to allow direct access, so you can click the link to join or copy and paste the meeting ID into your current Zoom account, and it'll pop you right in. So awesome. Thank you so much, Anthony. And I'm gonna end this session, and we'll start our next 2 sessions right now. Thanks, guys.